Hello and welcome to Podawakens presents Chronological Clone Wars. My name is Jordan. With me, as always, on his first watch of the Clone Wars is Logan. How you doing, Logan?
I'm good, Jordan. It is getting very warm down here in Florida, which means more time spent in the parks. I need to go out to Galaxy's Edge. I haven't been out there in a long time, and they've got a bunch of the new stuff. I missed, so I guess when they dropped the new scene, like we're recording way out, so this has been, months. I guess a
This
month
one
ago.
is probably like 2 weeks ago.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. All right, so, but yeah, Galaxy's Edge. They did the new scenes for Ahsoka and Andor. I think I forget which ones they
There's
did.
no actual scene for Andor, and
Nah.
so it's the scene is the space whales from Ahsoka,
Mm,
from what I understand. And then there's transmissions, like the characters that come in and say we need your help would be Andor, Mando, and Ahsoka.
okay, because I saw the whales on somebody videoed it,
How do you
but
video that with the 3D? Like, does it?
it's
How do people do
blurry.
that? Oh, okay,
It's either blurry or I've seen some
they
people are
like put the
smart.
camera through
They'll
the.
put the camera through the glasses, yeah, which is what I'd have to do the ride anyway, because I can't do that ride. Jordan knows that from
Yeah,
experience. I about threw up all over Jordan. Um,
I told him I was like, this is gonna be no problem for you.
yeah, Jordan's like, this is gonna be fine. You'll be great. And
I
about
feel like
I
you've
don't know.
gotten worse though, right? Like I feel
I
like
have,
when we
yeah,
had our first program, you could ride certain things, and it was like by
yes.
2015 you couldn't.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, no, I've like my family's always struggled with vertigo. So even
Mm.
the Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, it gets me. So like when I'm in it, I just face the and I kind of look
Buttons.
around. Yeah, and then every once
Yeah.
in a while I'll look and then I'll look back because I'm like, oh, I can look and then look back because as long as I'm not wearing anything and it's not flying at me and I just look and then because I know myself now to where back then I was like, no, I can do this, and then I would get like halfway through it and go, and it turns on a dime. Like it's so quick that my head just starts to swim, and then I get real clammy and sweaty. And it used to put me down for days, but I think because I've gotten used to it and know how to
Mm.
kind of handle it, it helps. But anyway, what I was saying with that was just there's a lot of Star Wars stuff all over Twitter, Jordan. So that's always an exciting time whenever something new comes. I know Mando and Grogu were out at Disneyland. I don't think they brought them out at World, but
They did. They've brought them out
did
at
they bring them
World.
out
Yeah.
World? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if they brought them out recently because there were
I haven't
times
been
where like
able to see them because
yeah,
they're like on very sporadic
yeah,
times, I think, because they don't like stop for meet and greet. They walk like
yeah.
the other characters.
I know
And when
they
I was
try to.
last down there, I got great pictures of Ray. Like she was just doing her
Yeah,
thing in that little
in
garage
the yep,
area, and nobody had really caught on she was there yet. So I was like taking pictures.
right. Because Chewie and her and is it Val? I think is the other person that's
Oh
walking
yeah,
around. I
what's her
forget her
name?
name.
I think it is no Vi. It's like Vi.
Vi.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
Vi.
right. Because she walks around, and then of course the stormtroopers walk around. Kylo Ren comes out with the stormtroopers. They're much more frequent, but like Mando and
Disneyland
Grogu.
gets all the cool stuff though, because
Yeah,
Disneyland just announced they're getting Sabine.
yeah.
They've gotten Ahsoka. You know, they've gotten Hera and Chopper. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell? Bring,
It
bring
give
them over
us
here.
just give them character. Like I would do some of the offshoot characters, like the Rhodians or something. Like
Yeah,
people that wouldn't necessarily garner a ton of attention because some
that's what they
you
used to do at
know
Star Wars weekends. They have
right
like Greedo, and other like Jawas and
right bring a
Rhodians.
Saj
At
out. That'd be
yeah.
cool.
Oh yeah, I met her at Star Wars weekend.
You met a Saj, the actual voice actor, or like
No,
actual
no, like
character?
the character.
I didn't know she was out during Star Wars weekend.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find a photo later. But
We still need to do that episode with Jack. That'd be fun.
what
Planning the
episode?
Star Wars weekend.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. See, I even forgot about it. I'll have to make sure I write that down. Okay, we are on week 22 of our journey here, which has been a week that I think will go down in infamy. This is a week people were very excited for us to get to, I'm sure, because it is one of the most famous arcs of the Clone Wars. We're talking about the Mortis Trilogy, as people call it, um, which are Season 3, Episode 15, Overlords, Season 3, Episode 16, Altar of Mortis, Season 3, Episode 17, Ghosts of Mortis, are the episodes that we are talking about today. Um, I guess, Logan, before we dive into any specific episodes, um, just like general thoughts on maybe I don't know how much
Favorite
you've heard
parts.
about these. Yeah, I don't know how much you've heard about this arc before I mentioned it at all recently, or if it was something that was like a blind spot for you, or because it's one I see people on like Twitter will talk about a lot. They did show up a little bit in Ahsoka as well, which I'll mention during our episode. But kind of like your thoughts on this arc that has kind of become a lot of people's favorite arcs, or like really deep in the understanding of the Force.
I will say the first episode took me a while to get into. I was kind of like, this isn't, and it's still not one of my favorites. But I do think it's got interesting elements, and I know some people put this down as part of one of their favorite arcs, but I don't know. Like, I think there's other ones that are much better. But at first, Jordan, I thought we were going to Mordor, and I was like, well, that's going to be different because this will be a weird crossover. Because I'm not sure that Tolkien would really like that. But overall, I thought it was good. Like, I thought it explained quite a bit, and it's the first time that I can remember, I think, that we really get into Anakin's, like, I guess, night terrors that he really has. And especially once we get into Revenge of the Sith, and you get Anakin having those sweats, and he can feel pain, and he hears the screaming, and he hears the pain that others feel. And then we also get Qui-Gon, and so it's like, this is all, I mean, it was cool to see all of those characters come back and get backstories to everything else. And then, Jordan, we finally, for the first time, I believe, we get a real connection with Ahsoka and the actual Ahsoka, the show, because it felt like when she had her vision that it was very similar to the ones that she had in her show.
Yeah, it's very like like she's older Ahsoka, right?
Yeah.
That's coming to her, and it's
Hmm.
very she kind of looks like she will in Rebels, like very she's older. It's supposed to be like far in the future type of thing, and yeah, that really struck me this time because obviously when we saw these episodes originally, there was no older Ahsoka.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when I
Yeah.
watched these, Rebels
This
hadn't
was
aired
Ahsoka.
yet.
Yeah.
It was, or Rebels was airing, but she hadn't showed up yet. And it's like there was no older Ahsoka at that point. Where you're so this time it actually hit me because I'm like, I've seen older Ahsoka. I've seen her in
Yeah.
Rebels. I've seen her in Ahsoka. I've seen her in Mandalorian, and it's like it's really helping bridge a lot of this stuff together. Um,
And I know, like, the chat boards and like X and them probably weren't as a buzz as they currently are. Was there ever any like rumble? Do you remember there being rumblings of possibly having like an Ahsoka, like kind of like a spinoff or separation? Because I feel like that was still back in the time where we weren't really streaming wasn't like massive yet. It was
yeah, it was
still
2011 that these
yeah.
three aired, and it was so this is the year before Disney will purchase
Okay.
Lucasfilm. So at that point, I feel like people were kind of taking George's words of there's no like films coming, and that this would be everybody was really bought into the idea that Ahsoka has to die because she doesn't appear in Revenge of the Sith,
Mhm.
and obviously that's something people always latch on to. In I would say in any franchise, if it's something that takes place in a prequel, they're like,
Yeah.
well, this
Then
person
where
has
were
to
they?
die. They don't
Yeah.
appear in the originals, and it's like there's other ways to get there, right? And we'll see how Ahsoka gets there, but there are other ways to get around that than just killing off the character. Um, so you're right. I have no clue how people were reacting to this at this point. I feel like people were still really bought into Ahsoka has to die, but this vision of her in the future doesn't. I mean, like it doesn't really state anything, right? Like it doesn't have to come true. Her being in the like her older self vision doesn't have to be true. It's a vision, but I think that people were probably ignoring that little bit and just thinking, no, she has to die. She's not in
Right.
episode 3. She's not in the originals. So if she's not in the episode 3 or the originals, what would she have been doing if she survived? And
Yeah.
they didn't think we'd get those answers, so they just think she died.
You can say the same for Anakin's mom though when she shows up. Like, it's like, well, she's not alive clearly. So it's
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of that projection of what they knew of.
Yeah. but I think it's supposed to be. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of stuff that you can dive into with this arc in particular
Hmm.
on all that kind of stuff. So I guess let's do it. I think what I'm gonna do is instead of doing episode by episode, we're gonna just talk the whole thing. So let me get this out of the way. Overlords was directed by Stuart Lee, written by Christian Taylor, premiered January 28th, 2011. Altar of Mortis, directed by Brian Kalin O'Connell, written by Christian Taylor, aired February 4th, 2011. And Ghost of Mortis, directed by Stuart Lee, written by Christian Taylor, premiered February 11th, 2011 on Cartoon Network. Yeah. So what happens here, right, is they're trying to, as we dive into it, Anakin's trying to fix, like the ship, right? They no, sorry, that's the wrong. I'm looking at the wrong story. Okay. They get an old Jedi code, 2,000-year-old Jedi code, and they need to go investigate it. They send Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka to go investigate. Rex and the rest of the clones are already there. When they get to the coordinates, though, neither one can see each other, and they start losing connection on the, uh, comlinks. Then we see like a diamond-shaped object, which I would call like a black Sims diamond, right? You know how the Sims always
Yeah,
have that like
that
that
little
diamond
diamond above
above?
their head.
That's what it looks
Yeah.
like. And later on, one of these buildings in here has like the Sim, the Sim
Yep.
diamond above the building, and that's all I could think about. Um, they get pulled in and they wake up, and the ship is on a planet that looks a lot like Pandora over in Animal Kingdom with the floating rocks.
It is true.
Uh, and Anakin just hears a voice. Are you the one? Right? And eventually we'll get introduced by someone who calls herself the daughter. And she mentions how she will take Anakin to him. Only he can help you, and that they must have shelter by nightfall. And they start noticing some weird things, right? There's no animals, there's no creatures, no life forms at all so far on this planet. And they both, Obi-Wan and Anakin, definitely feel that the Force is very strong on this planet. Anakin gets separated from them. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka will run into a man who calls himself the Son, and he asks, "Is it true he's the chosen one?" And that puts Obi-Wan on edge right now because Obi-Wan knows of the prophecy. Qui-Gon mentioned it, right? Like he is very aware of this prophecy, and he's wondering how this guy would know that Anakin is part of the prophecy, and it unnerves him a bit that he whips out his lightsaber, but the Son is able to just shut them off with the Force. What was your thoughts when you run into the daughter and the Son here? Your original thoughts on who these people might be or what was going on?
I thought maybe Anakin was saying like Force Ghost at first, and then
Right.
he seemed very confused, and then at first I still don't get it. Like they don't hear the daughter like say anything, but then it's like they see her. I don't know. It's weird. Like at first they don't see her, and then when she's talking to Anakin, but then it seems like they do see her. So I was really confused. I was very very confused by it because it's like, wait, I thought they didn't see her, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, let's go with his voice. Like I was so confused, and I think maybe because Anakin was kind of like, yeah, this thing's talking to me, but I don't know. I thought it was interesting. I didn't have any idea where it was going. When it first started, I was like, the further we got into it, I was like, well, I mean, obviously, until he shuts off the lightsabers with the Force, I was like, what are these things? Like, are they
Yeah.
ghosts? Are they spirits? Like, what are they gods? I
They
didn't
don't
know.
even have names.
Right,
They are just the Son and the daughter.
right. And I think whenever you think Force, you think lightsabers. So you're like, okay, why don't they?
Right.
They're
Right.
not Jedi, but they know they're Force sensitive. So it's like, well, I'm so confused. So very confused at first.
And then Anakin meets the father as well, who will call himself the father. He is the father to these two, obviously, the son and the daughter. While Qui-Gon visits Obi-Wan, you mentioned that, and he mentions that this planet is a conduit in which the entire Force flows through. So, uh, me, so I guess in that sense, right? Like, what we learned from the last episode of this is none of this physically happened, right? They wake back up and they've only lost contact with Rex for like a moment,
Mm-hmm.
he said. So this is the Force pulling some sort of chicanery on our characters here. So I think originally people were kind of put off from the first episode. You know, when it's first airing, I think people could be put off by saying the Force is a physical place, and then we learned that it wasn't really there, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it is a manifestation um, of the Force, and it's how it's presenting itself, and that is why the Force is so strong there. They are pretty much like in the Force at this point, dealing with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I mean, the daughter. And then,
God.
but Qui-Gon will say there are 3 here who seek Skywalker. They, like me, believe him to be the chosen one. And we get Obi-Wan saying, I've trained him as well as I could. At the same time that this is going on, we get Shmi visiting Anakin. You know, Anakin's mom is visiting Anakin. Nothing ever really dies, my son. You are more than a Jedi. Stuff like that. But he does mention like I fell in love. I have Padme. You've met her. You know, she's the Queen of Naboo who was in our house that day. And she mentions like she is not your destiny. And this is where we get older Ahsoka visiting young Ahsoka. But Anakin says something interesting when he meets the father. He thinks that the father is like a Sith Lord, which I guess tracks, right? Like they know there's a Sith Lord out there above Dooku. He's using the Force to do this stuff, so he's probably thinking like, oh, this must be something evil. But really, the father is like neutral, and in fact, the father is a manifestation of balance in the Force, right? Like so, mainly the son is the dark side, the daughter is the light side, and he wants Anakin to replace him as balancing the Force as the chosen one is supposed to do. But I think it's funny. Anakin says the chosen one is a myth when he talks to the father. This is a prophecy about himself that he does not seemingly believe in. Why do you think that is?
I think Obi-Wan's told him not to. Like
Hmm.
I feel like he's had conversations maybe where Obi-Wan's like, there's this idea that there is a chosen one that balances the Force, and probably doesn't get into specifics. Like Qui-Gon has told me that we believe it's you, but I think probably is there's. I'd assume Obi-Wan approaches it like there's not one certain entity or one entity at all, because I feel like Obi-Wan would be I wouldn't say a denier, but I would say he would be more calculated not to believe this, because he'd be like, I don't believe it. I don't think there is one. So maybe Anakin's been told that, because otherwise I feel like Anakin's arrogant enough to believe that he is. Like I feel like Anakin would be like, I need to find out more about this chosen one stuff.
I like that because I think it is very. It's not how I thought of it, but I think that is probably the correct approach because I think you're right. Obi-Wan wouldn't want him to believe in it because he'd get really cocky, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
dealing with the chosen one, and we kind of get that in the third episode, of
Right.
course, when he's like talking about you're putting me on the council but not giving me the rank of master. Like this is egregious, you know.
Every time I
It,
hear this, yeah, I think of, you remember there's like, I think it's either the fifth or sixth and Harry Potter movie, because he's also the chosen one, and I think
yeah,
Hermione says something along the lines of, why do you think all these people like your attention? He goes, because I'm a chosen one. Like who
right,
would
right.
I just think of Anakin going, I mean, who wouldn't want a piece of this?
I think he does that in the book too, right? Like, but I think the movie played it off
More,
comically,
yeah,
but
more
in the
for
book, like Order of the Phoenix is when he's going through uh
that anger
so
and that.
much stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, that I think I remember reading it in all caps, him yelling like, "I'm
yeah,
the chosen one."
right, yeah,
You're like, dude,
yeah.
stop pushing
Now,
your
yeah,
friends
he
away.
didn't yell about the Goblet of Fire or Dumbledore, but Harry
Yeah,
yelled.
yeah, Dumbledore pulled that
Yeah,
one.
they've
Yeah,
switched it. But yeah, no, every time I think of chosen one, I think Harry Potter. But then I'm like, that's also Anakin. So
yeah. The father wants him to do a test, so he gets the son and daughter to drop off Ahsoka and Obi-Wan. And he says, I've ordered my children to kill your friends. Which one do you choose to save? And he says, release the guilt and free yourself by choosing. And Anakin doesn't choose. He uses the Force and is able to save both. This was the test because only the chosen one could be able to tame both the dark side and the light side and bring balance. And that's when he says, I'm dying. I want you to replace me. And he says, if you leave, your selfishness will haunt you. And they try to leave. So that's the end of the first episode. Altar of Mortis. So, immediately right after that, they pick up on the ship. Anakin is dreaming, and pretty much Ahsoka gets like just taken by the sun immediately at the beginning of this. But one thing in Anakin's dream here, the sun says that they will destroy the Sith and the Jedi. But the way he says "and the Jedi" is like Palpatine's "the Jedi," and I thought that was very interesting. How they play with stuff like that. But Obi-Wan and Anakin crash. I don't count this as a crash of Anakin's ship because this doesn't actually happen. They wake up in the ship. The son attacks the hold on. The father has a conversation with the son and the daughter. The brother bites Ahsoka at one point and will kind of, that's his way of infecting her a bit. Obi-Wan and the daughter are going to go together to the altar, and that's where they find a blade, and the blade is who can control her brother. But this was all put in motion by the son to be able to get the blade to try to kill he's trying to kill the father, yes, and then the daughter will jump in front and it actually kills the daughter. But they're able to use the father's able to use his Force stuff to put the light side into Ahsoka to kind of clear her from the infection as the daughter's last act. But I think something that I found very interesting is that the brother says the only person he's really loved is his sister. He has, which I found interesting because he is the dark side, right? But he loved a light side thing like that. So I really wonder what they were trying to get at with that. I'm sure you can read so much into that stuff. But it seemed like he had a really good relationship with the daughter, even though that is kind of his opposite.
The Sith can feel things, so they're allowed to.
Then we have that's pretty much the end of that episode. That one had a lot of action stuff going on, not a lot of deep thought. But yeah, so then they're trying to fix the ship. The father is burying his daughter. The father wants to kill the son. He says he's too powerful for you alone. They mention that the Force will decide. And Qui-Gon comes now to talk to Anakin. And he says, I believe you will bring balance to the Force. And tells him to look deeper. The son and Anakin talk. And the Force is out of balance. I have to stop you, is what Anakin will say to him. But the son pulls something very interesting. He says, know what you will become. And we see the future here, right? We see the sun turns into smoke. We see Padme choking. We see Palpatine. We see a planet blowing up, which I assume is Alderaan. We see Vader helmet in the smoke. The Imperial March is playing. We see Anakin lighting up his lightsaber in front of younglings. Very, very interesting having Anakin see that. Now they do have to remove that from his brain because it wouldn't track with the rest of the series. But what was your thoughts when we kind of get these teases to Darth Vader's future?
It was one where I was like, well, that's kind of weird because is this where it starts, his path to the dark side, and he remembers some of this stuff. But ultimately, I was like, this makes sense. This is where I was like, okay, this is where it's gotten really good. It just having that vision of things to come and what Vader will look like and who Vader is, and just kind of that rise from good to evil. And but again, I think Anakin a lot of Anakin's just that conflict, an internal conflict of he knows that it's powerful and he knows that it's strong and he knows that there's certain things that he has tendencies to do, which is interesting because the next week's episode, because we watch these in bunches, we get some of what Anakin's, I don't know, we get a lot of Anakin values, and this is one of them. I
Yeah.
think where you see Anakin conflicted, like he knows there's a lot of strength, and he feels there's a lot of strength on the dark side and things that probably could benefit him from being on the dark side, but also he's brought back by the light. So he's
May
an
not be
interesting character.
may not be a guy you want to vote for.
No,
Anyway.
yeah, no, not in the next election, maybe the following.
But so I think it is funny that once Anakin knows all this stuff, he says, to Obi-Wan, you don't understand what I have to do to end the Clone Wars, because he's seen everything, right? So
Mhm.
he still knows that this is the right. Like when he sees this stuff, he kind of gets corrupted with the thought of, I have to, like, this is what I have to do to stop this stuff. And he mentions, like, it is the Jedi who stand in the way of peace, because he probably saw the part where they attack Palpatine and he's misreading it, right? Like he's not understanding why that is, and unfortunately, you know, that's what happens. The son is all like, he's mine now. But he also mentions, like, I can't let what I become happen. So he's still trying to prevent himself from becoming Darth Vader, but he knows that there's certain things he has to do. It's almost like he's going to try to play the middle, is what I guess his plan is. But the father is like, your destiny can change. If there is to be balance, what you have seen must be forgotten. And he kind of like takes it out of his head, because he knows that if there actually is going to be balance, he can't know like what's going to happen. He needs to be able to let this stuff play out, however is needed, because he does bring balance to the Force. George has spoken on that when he does Return of the Jedi. When he throws Palpatine over. So ultimately, he was successful in that regard. And then he says, like, my son broke the laws of time and showed you what you shouldn't have seen. I have erased that time. You shall never know. And that's when Obi-Wan and Ahsoka arrive. The son arrives. The father will take the blade and kill himself. And Anakin then kills the son. And the father dies, and they all wake up on their ship. And that's where Rex messages come in and say that you were only off the scopes for a moment. And they're all like, we've been gone a lot longer than that.
Oh man.
Days. It was days. They were like sleeping, they were doing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Seeing ghosts.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, pretty interesting episode that gets into what the Force is. It's like seeing the religious aspect of the Force, right? Like the father, I made that joke earlier, the father, the son, and the daughter, who are, this is in Ahsoka, by the way, when they go to Peridea. This is the father, obviously, and then you have the son over here, and it looks like the daughter's statue is broken. And of course, this is when Balin is standing on that at the end of the finale.
That's cool.
They pop up again later. They'll pop up in Rebels as well. The father, his son, and the daughter, not as like characters themselves, but as like interpretations of the Force that people have had. And I think that is the main thing you have to look at when you look at this episode. Is some people take this stuff literally, but I think this is really supposed to show you that this is, this isn't literal. There isn't really a father, a son, and the daughter, in my opinion. That is how it's explained to us, for us to understand the war of the Force going on that needs to be brought to balance, right?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of that. And I mean, I keep going back to Harry Potter because it's what I grew up with, but it's the same thing as the Deathly Hallows. Like, it's explained to us as the three brothers. It's explained to us as, father, daughter, son. I think in a lot of, it goes back to being very, I mean, I wouldn't tie it into like Christianity, but I'd tie it into religion. Like, there's so many stories that are told through different religions that, it helps us for a representation of what things actually are. Like they're, a lot of times the characters in some of these religious texts are, you know, I would say an idea of what loyalty is, or an idea of what courage or deceit, something like that. Like I think the snake in the grass, like the Adam and Eve kind of thing. It's that good and evil representation. So it is interesting. Like it's cool to see storytelling date back for so long, tie into stories that we're telling today. So
Yeah, it just makes you think. Like, of course, like there would be some sort of like
like lore,
history of this
yeah,
in the Star Wars universe. If we can't understand life, that we create religions in order to
right,
experience it, then
yep,
imagine having an object like the Force
yep,
that lives through everything and you can manipulate it. You would of course be like, oh well, there is, you know two sides, and there's a guy in the middle that balances them. That's the father,
right,
this is the son. Like you would create those like parable type things to be able to understand it and teach it to other people and make
yeah,
statues to it. Because what else would you make a statue to for the Force,
right,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
I quite like that. I'm really curious, where they go with this in Ahsoka season 2. Which when they announced that, the photo for that was the hand that he is standing on top of, Balin. So it does seem like that is still going to play a role in Ahsoka season 2. And just since this moment as well, there is a uh, an owl that you will see with Ahsoka a lot of the times, and it is kind of like a manifestation of the light side of the Force. And since the daughter kind of goes into Ahsoka here and heals her, um, it is it's kind of thought to be the light side, the daughter, being affiliated with that. So it is called a Morai, is a female convor that has spiritual ties to the daughter from Mortis, and she kind of starts appearing more over Ahsoka and with Ahsoka after this Mortis thing, when she gets kind of like the daughter put into her. So it's kind of like, it seems like the light side, the daughter, is watching over Ahsoka, certain things. So I do wonder, we have like these statues, the daughter's looks to be broken, but at the end of Ahsoka, we do see her with the convor, the owl. She like looks at the owl and she's like, oh, and she like has a smile, like we're right where we need to be. She understands that she is doing something bigger at that point. So it's all very interesting, and I wonder, where they go with it. I love seeing Dave Filoni tackle more of this stuff when it comes to the Mortis stuff. Give us deeper Force mythology. I like it.
mm-hmm.
Instead of just, oh, the Force, you can push things, you can pull things. All right. Well, I guess that wraps up our Mortis talk here. Right? Anything else about Mortis before we?
No, good episode. It was very
Yeah.
different from what we've gotten, and like you said, I think it's a lot of fun to explore the intricacies of the Force and balance to the Force, because we hear about balance all the time, but we don't
Yeah.
actually, we don't we see them in physical numbers. It's like, oh, okay, well that's balance now, but now we get more of like what that actually means, and you know, I think that's pretty big, and still it's more of an internal struggle with Anakin, and I think with most Jedi. I think most Jedi flirt with the dark side at times. So
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure we could probably talk more about it, in the sense of like, I'm sure people listening are like, oh, you didn't mention this thing, you didn't mention that thing. It is a very like deep story, right? Like, I feel like anybody's interpretation of it is probably valid.
mm-hmm.
But I'm kind of holding off because I feel like we will obviously get more information as Ahsoka season 2 comes, and what that ties to this planet that was in a whole nother galaxy
Yeah.
that they had to travel to, has our force people from our galaxy, these manifestations of the Father, the Daughter, and Son. That's like, okay, that's going to tie into something somehow. We'll get more stuff with that, but obviously, Anakin will bring balance to the Force. That was correct, and it just took him a path that wasn't great to to get there, but he will ultimately fulfill his destiny in Return of the Jedi. All right, well, you can follow us at podawakens on all of our social medias. I'm still dropping our High Republic Road to the Acolyte series currently, so make sure you keep checking that out. That's been a lot of fun. And yeah, look, Logan and I are planning to get all these recorded before my wife goes into labor, which means we're going to be at some point months ahead of the releases. So if we start talking about stuff that happened forever ago, or we stop talking about recent events during those episodes, it is because we will be so far ahead than what we're releasing. I did the math. I thought we would only get like a month ahead. We're gonna get like 3 months ahead at some point, and that's crazy. But it's necessary, so that way this chronological Clone Wars finishes this year, within the 52 weeks of when we started releasing them, and I think that's important. And then we'll take a break, and we'll come back for Bad Batch. We'll go into that order, and I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to put in Tales of the Empire. We will do Ron and Chris and I will do a Tales of the Empire episode around May 4th whenever they drop. We'll cover it then, but I kind of want to also cover it with you, Logan, when we get there in those points for those characters. So I'm thinking we'll slot it in somewhere, probably after Bad Batch is my thinking. And then at some point we'll get into Rebels, but all that stuff will be figured out later on down the road. But I just wanted to put the preface there that like I'm going to probably stop plugging stuff that's coming up on the podcast, because at some point I'm not going to know what the hell is coming up on the podcast because I'm going to be so far in advance.
Yeah.
So I did drop a trailer discussion of Tales of the Empire probably 2 weeks ago now, so make sure you check that out if you're interested in that. But going forward, we're going to stop plugging stuff like that because it's just going to get so far in advance. And I'll probably say this disclaimer a lot just so people are not like, oh, you didn't talk about this thing at all on here. There will probably be an episode discussing about that thing separately on the podcast feed, but just wanted to clear that up before we dive into where we start getting too far in advance. Right now we're like 2 weeks in advance. We're going to get way far in advance. So thank you all for watching and listening with us. You can like and subscribe to us here on the YouTube channel. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, which helps other people find our show. And yeah, so thanks all for watching. We'll catch you next time.